The days passed slowly on the station. Daniel and his team were treated like honored guests, given tours of impressive facilities, and introduced to representatives from dozens of different species. But underneath the polite smiles and friendly words, something felt wrong. Daniel could sense it in the way certain aliens watched them. He could hear it in the careful pauses before answers to difficult questions. Kevin Walsh reported to him each evening with observations from the security team. The big man stood with his arms crossed, his face troubled. "The Morthani delegation has been following us," Kevin said. "They pretend to be going the same direction, but it's too consistent to be coincidence. And the Silith representatives, they get nervous whenever we ask about their homeworld. Change the subject immediately." "What about the Droon?" Daniel asked. "That's the strangest part. They haven't spoken to anyone in 3 days. They just sit in their quarters and stare at nothing. One of my people tried to start a conversation, and the Droon looked at him like he was already dead." Daniel considered this information carefully. The council presented itself as a happy family of species working together in harmony. But families had secrets. And this family had been keeping secrets for 12,000 years. He decided to seek out someone who might give him honest answers. Ambassador Yeltris of the Fenari was known throughout the galaxy as a philosopher and deep thinker. The insect-like being had written extensively about the nature of civilization and the meaning of existence. If anyone would speak truthfully, it might be him. Daniel requested a private meeting, and to his surprise, Yeltris agreed immediately. They met in a garden chamber filled with glowing plants that pulsed with soft blue light. The air was warm and humid, and strange sounds echoed from somewhere in the foliage. Yeltris waited for him on a bench made of living wood. The Fenari was smaller than Daniel had expected, with a hard shell covering most of his body and large compound eyes that reflected the bioluminescent glow. His mandibles clicked softly as Daniel approached. "Ambassador Carter," Yeltris said, "you seem troubled for someone receiving such an honor." Daniel sat down across from him. "I'm trying to understand what this honor really means. Your species joined the Council 4,000 years ago. Can you tell me what changed for you?" Yeltris was quiet for a long moment. The clicking of his mandibles slowed, and his eyes seemed to dim slightly. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of ages. "We were different before joining. We built ships that could cross between galaxies, not just between stars. We explored places that the Council considered too dangerous, too unpredictable. We dreamed of things that had never been dreamed before. And now? Now we are administrators. We manage our assigned sectors. We attend our assigned meetings. We submit our reports and follow our procedures." Yeltris made a sound that might have been a sigh. "It is peaceful. It is stable. It is everything the Council promises. But is it fulfilling?" Daniel asked, the Fenari's compound eyes fixed on him with sudden intensity. "Fulfillment is a luxury that the Council does not recognize. They value stability above all things. Predictability, control. A species that dreams too boldly might upset the careful balance they have maintained for millennia. So dreams are discouraged? Dreams are dangerous, Ambassador. They lead to change, and change is the one thing the Council fears most." Daniel returned to his quarters that night with a heavy heart. He gathered his entire team for a private briefing, making sure all recording devices were disabled. Dr. Lisa Monroe presented the research she had been conducting since their arrival. "I've analyzed the historical records of every species that joined the Council over the past 6,000 years, she began. "The pattern is unmistakable. Every single one of them experienced what I can only describe as cultural stagnation within 300 years of membership." "Define stagnation," Amy said. "Innovation rates drop by an average of 64%. New scientific discoveries become rare. artistic expression becomes formulaic, following approved patterns and themes. Birth rates stabilize at exact replacement levels, no higher, no lower. It's as if joining the council puts civilizations into a kind of sleep. Lieutenant Scott Bradley, their communications specialist, shook his head in disbelief. Why would anyone agree to that? Why give up everything that makes you special? Lisa replied. Because the alternative is being alone. The galaxy is a dangerous place. There are cosmic phenomena that can destroy entire solar systems. There are hostile species that never join the Council and prey on the weak. The Council offers protection, resources, stability. For most species, that trade seems worth it. At first, Daniel added quietly. Yes, at first. By the time they realize what they've lost, it's too late. They've forgotten how to dream. They've forgotten that they ever wanted more than what the Council provides. The room fell silent. Outside the window, ships from 100 different worlds moved through the darkness, all of them following Council-approved routes to Council-approved destinations. A galaxy of incredible diversity, all slowly becoming the same. There's something else, Lisa said, her voice dropping even lower. I tried to access records about species that declined membership. The system blocked my request, said it required elevated clearance. Why would that be classified? Kevin asked. That's exactly what I want to know. Daniel stood and walked to the window. His reflection stared back at him, superimposed over the stars. Behind him stood his team, people who had trusted him to lead them through the most important diplomatic mission in human history. We came here expecting to find allies, he said slowly. Partners who would help humanity reach its full potential. Instead, I'm beginning to think we've been invited into a trap. A very old, very elegant trap that has captured 47 species before us. Amy came to stand beside him. What do you want to do? I want the truth, all of it, no matter how ugly it might be. He turned to face them. Something happened to the species that said no. Something the Council doesn't want anyone to know about. And I intend to find out what. The team exchanged glances, but nodded in agreement. They had come too far to turn back now. The truth was waiting somewhere in this station, hidden behind 12,000 years of carefully constructed lies. And Daniel Carter was going to find it. The formal membership ceremony was scheduled for the end of the week. That gave them 5 days to uncover secrets that the most powerful organization in the galaxy wanted to keep buried. It would have to be enough. Daniel could not sleep. His mind kept turning over everything he had learned, searching for answers that refused to come. Finally, he gave up trying and decided to walk through the station's corridors, hoping that movement might clear his thoughts. The station was quieter at night, though on a structure this large, night was just a social agreement. The lights dimmed in certain sections, and fewer aliens moved through the hallways. Daniel wandered without direction, letting his feet carry him wherever they wanted to go. He passed through trading districts where goods from across the galaxy sat in darkened windows. He walked by residential areas where soft sounds of alien music drifted through closed doors. He climbed stairs and descended ramps, going deeper and deeper into the station's vast interior. Eventually, he found himself standing before an enormous doorway marked with symbols he did not recognize. The door was old, much older than the gleaming corridors around it. The metal was tarnished, and the symbols had been worn smooth by countless years. Historical archives, his translator finally managed to interpret. Daniel pushed the door open and stepped inside. The chamber beyond was vast and dark, lit only by scattered lights that floated like fireflies among towering shelves of data storage. The smell of age hung in the air, that particular scent of ancient things preserved against time. Daniel moved forward slowly, his footsteps echoing in the silence. An automated system detected his presence and spoke in a flat, mechanical voice. Welcome to the Council Historical Archives. Please state your area of interest. I want to see records of species that declined membership, Daniel said. There was a long pause. That query requires elevated clearance. I'm a prospective member ambassador. Surely, I'm entitled to understand all my options before making a decision. Another pause, even longer than the first. Daniel was about to give up and leave when a different voice spoke from the shadows. This voice was not mechanical. It was old and tired and very much alive. You ask dangerous questions, human. Daniel spun around, his heart pounding. A small figure emerged from between the towering shelves. It was unlike any species he had seen during his time on the station. The creature was hunched with age, its skin wrinkled and gray like ancient leather. Its eyes were enormous and completely dark, like two pools of ink. Its hands had too many fingers, and they twitched constantly, as if playing an invisible instrument. "Who are you?" Daniel demanded. "I am called Morveth. I am the keeper of this place. The true archive, not the pretty histories they show to visitors." "True archives?" Morveth made a sound that might have been laughter. "Come. There are things you need to see. Things the Council has worked very hard to make everyone forget." Daniel followed the strange creature deeper into the archives, past sections that grew increasingly dusty and abandoned. Finally, they reached a small chamber hidden behind a wall of obsolete equipment. Morveth touched a panel, and holographic displays flickered to life. What Daniel saw made his blood turn to ice. "The Nethrani," Morveth said, pointing to an image of tall, graceful beings with wings like stained glass. "They declined membership 7,000 years ago. They wanted to explore the Galactic Rim, places the Council considered too unstable. Within 2 centuries, their trade routes were blocked by Council members. Their allies were pressured to abandon them. Eventually, they faced a war against 3 species who had been secretly armed by Council interests. The Nethrani no longer exist." The display shifted to show another species, shorter beings covered in thick fur. "The Voss. They refused membership 5,000 years ago. They believed in absolute freedom of information, which the Council saw as a threat to stability. Economic sanctions strangled their economy. Their colonies were isolated one by one. When they finally asked to reconsider membership, the Council demanded terms so harsh that the Voss chose extinction instead. More images followed, more species, more stories of decline and destruction. Each one had said no to the Council, and each one had paid a terrible price. "How is this possible?" Daniel whispered. "How could they destroy so many civilizations without anyone knowing?" "The Council is patient," Morveth replied. "They do not strike quickly like predators. They work slowly, over centuries, making each step seem natural and inevitable. A trade dispute here, a border conflict there. By the time anyone realizes what is happening, it is already too late. Why are you showing me this?" Morveth's enormous eyes fixed on Daniel with an intensity that seemed to pierce through him. "Because my species was the last to refuse. We were called the Cathari. We were scientists, philosophers, seekers of truth. We believed that knowledge should be free, that no single organization should control the flow of information across the galaxy. And the Council destroyed you. They tried. They failed to destroy all of us." Morveth gestured at himself with those strange, many-fingered hands. "I survived. I hid here, in the very heart of their power, keeping these records so that someone might one day understand the truth, so that someone might finally say no and mean it." Daniel stared at the holographic displays, at the faces of extinct species who had dared to dream of freedom. He thought about his own people back on Earth and scattered across 100 colony worlds. He thought about all the futures they might have, and all the futures the Council might take from them. If we refuse, they will do the same to us, he said. Perhaps, Morveth acknowledged. Or perhaps you are different. Humanity is young, but you have something the others lacked. You have survived impossible odds before. You have fought against your own nature and won. You have looked into the void and refused to be afraid. That's a lot of faith to put in a species you barely know. I have watched you for 60 years, Ambassador. I have seen how your kind responds to challenges. You do not surrender. You do not give up. You find a way forward even when no way seems possible. Morveth moved closer, and his voice dropped to barely a whisper. The galaxy needs someone to finally stand up to the Council, someone to show that there is another path. Perhaps that someone is you. Daniel left the archives as the station's artificial dawn began to brighten the corridors. His mind was full of terrible knowledge, secrets that had been buried for thousands of years. He knew now what the Council really was. He understood the price of membership and the price of refusal. Neither option was acceptable. But as he walked back toward his quarters, a new thought began to form. Perhaps there was a third option. Perhaps the choice was not between submission and destruction. Perhaps humanity could do something that no other species had ever managed. Perhaps they could simply walk away and survive. It would be the greatest gamble in human history. But humanity had always been a species of gamblers, and Daniel Carter was about to place the biggest bet of all. The membership ceremony was only 2 days away. Throughout the station, preparations were underway for what the Council considered a historic occasion. Banners were hung in the ceremonial chamber. Dignitaries from all 47 member species made arrangements to attend. The air hummed with anticipation. In the midst of all this excitement, High Counselor Zethrin summoned Daniel to a private meeting. The silver-skinned alien received him in a small office, high above the station's main district, where enormous windows looked out over the glittering expanse of ships and structures below. Ambassador Carter, Zethrin said, gesturing for Daniel to sit. I wanted to speak with you before the ceremony, to ensure we understand each other. Daniel took the offered seat, keeping his expression neutral. Of course, High Counselor. Zethrin's 4 hands folded together in a gesture that might have indicated concern. We have noticed some troubled behavior from your delegation. Members of your team have been asking unusual questions, researching historical records that are not typically of interest to prospective members, speaking with species known for their discontent. We simply wanted to understand what we were joining, Daniel replied carefully. Surely that's understandable. Understanding is admirable, but excessive curiosity can be destabilizing. Zethrin's black eyes fixed on Daniel with unsettling intensity. The Council functions because member species trust the system. They do not question decisions that have been proven effective over millennia. They do not dig into matters that have been settled long ago. And if we have concerns about certain clauses in the membership agreement? Zethrin was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried an edge that had not been there before. It has served 47 species for 12,000 years. Humanity is not so exceptional that it requires special accommodation. The words hung in the air between them. Daniel understood the message clearly. Accept our terms exactly as offered, or there will be consequences. I understand, Daniel said, rising from his seat. Thank you for the clarification, High Counselor. He left the office with his heart pounding, but his face revealed nothing. The mask stayed in place until he was back in the human quarters, with the door sealed behind him. That evening, Daniel gathered his entire delegation for a meeting he knew would change everything. They assembled in the largest room of their quarters, and Kevin Walsh swept the space for listening devices 3 times before Daniel would speak. I know what the Council really is, Daniel began, and I know what happens to species that refuse to join. He told them everything. Keeper, Morveth, and the extinct Cathari. The systematic destruction of every species that had dared to say no. When he finished, the room was completely silent. Dr. Nathan Cole, their historian, spoke first. His voice was shaky. If we refuse, they'll do the same thing to us. They'll strangle our trade, turn our allies against us, maybe even start wars. Humanity isn't ready for that kind of pressure. Maybe not, Daniel acknowledged. But are we ready for the alternative? Do we want to become like the Fenari, slowly forgetting everything that made us who we are? Do we want our children to grow up in a galaxy where dreams are forbidden? There has to be a middle path, said Dr. Lisa Monroe. Maybe we can negotiate better terms, reform the system from within. Amy Preston shook her head. You heard what Zethrin said. The agreement is non-negotiable. And even if we could change small things, the core would remain the same. Control, compliance, stagnation. Kevin Walsh stepped forward. He was a soldier, a man who had spent his life facing difficult choices. I've served humanity for 30 years. I've fought to protect our colonies, our people, our way of life. And I didn't do all that just to hand everything over to a bunch of aliens who think they know better than we do. So, what do we do? Scott Bradley asked. If joining is surrender and refusing is suicide, what options do we have left? Daniel walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth was spinning through space, carrying billions of humans who were counting on this delegation to make the right choice. Beyond Earth, colony worlds spread across dozens of star systems, each one filled with people who had left everything behind to build new lives among the stars. We walk away, Daniel said quietly. What do you mean? Lisa asked. He turned to face them. I mean we don't negotiate. We don't try to reform their system or find a compromise. We simply decline their invitation, thank them for their time, and leave. They'll come after us, Nathan warned. Maybe, but we're not like the others. We didn't expand into space because someone invited us. We fought our way up from Earth with nothing but determination and stubbornness. We colonized worlds that should have killed us. We survived disasters that should have ended our species a dozen times over. Daniel's voice grew stronger as he spoke. The Council thinks we're like all the others. They think we'll crumble the moment things get difficult. But they've never dealt with humans before. They don't understand that we've been fighting impossible odds since we first climbed down from the trees. Amy moved to stand beside him. If we do this, there's no going back. We'll be making enemies of the most powerful organization in the galaxy. We already have enemies. At least this way, we choose the battlefield. The debate continued for hours. Every argument was examined. Every possibility was considered. Some members of the delegation wanted to accept membership and hope for the best. Others wanted to delay the decision and gather more information. But in the end, when Daniel called for a vote, the result was nearly unanimous. Humanity would walk away. We're going to need a plan, Kevin said after the vote was settled. We can't just refuse and hope for the best. We need to prepare for what comes after. Daniel nodded. We have 2 days. That's enough time to send encrypted messages back to Earth, to warn our colonies, to begin preparing our defenses. When we leave this station, we need to hit the ground running. And the ceremony? Amy asked. Daniel smiled, and there was something fierce in that smile. Oh, we're still going to attend the ceremony. The Council has been planning this event for weeks. Every important figure in the galaxy will be watching. You want an audience, Lisa realized. I want the biggest audience possible. Because we're not just going to refuse their invitation. We're going to show every species in this galaxy that it's possible to say no. That the Council's power is not absolute. That there's still hope for those who refuse to surrender their dreams. The die was cast. In 2 days, Daniel Carter would stand before the assembled might of the Galactic Council and speak words that had not been spoken in 3,000 years. He only hoped humanity was ready for what would come next. The council chamber was filled with more beings than Daniel had ever seen in one place. Representatives from all 47 member species had gathered in the tiered seats that rose up toward the distant ceiling. Holographic cameras broadcast the event to trillions of viewers across the galaxy. This was the moment the council had been preparing for, the formal induction of humanity into their ancient fellowship. Daniel stood at the entrance to the chamber, with his delegation behind him. Amy was on his right, Kevin on his left. The others formed a line behind them, all dressed in their finest diplomatic attire. They looked calm and composed, but Daniel could feel the tension radiating from each of them. "Whatever happens in there," he said quietly, "I want you to know that I'm proud of every single one of you. No matter how this ends, we did the right thing." "No regrets," Amy replied. "No regrets." The great doors swung open, and they walked forward into the chamber. Every eye turned toward them. Thousands of aliens watched as the human delegation made their way down the central aisle toward the raised platform at the center of the room. Some looked curious. Others looked bored, as if this were just another routine ceremony. A few, Daniel noticed, watched with something that looked almost like hope. High Counselor Zethran stood at the central podium, the membership documents floating before him in a holographic display. His silver skin seemed to glow under the ceremonial lights, and his 4 arms were spread wide in welcome. "We gather today to welcome a new species into our eternal fellowship," Zethran announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "For 60 years, humanity has proven itself worthy of consideration. Today, we formally extend the hand of friendship and invite them to join our great community." Applause rippled through the chamber, polite and measured. "Ambassador Carter," Zethran continued, "please step forward to accept the terms of membership on behalf of your species." Daniel walked to the platform and climbed the steps until he stood facing Zethran across the floating documents. Behind him, he could feel his delegation watching. Before him, the entire galaxy waited. He looked at the documents, centuries of tradition and millennia of precedent, contained in flowing alien script. He thought about all the species that had stood where he was standing now, all of them accepting the chains disguised as gifts. He thought about the Thanari, who had once dreamed of crossing galaxies. He thought about the Cathari, who had chosen extinction over surrender. And he thought about humanity. Stubborn, impossible, beautiful humanity. "High Counselor," Daniel began, his voice steady and clear. "Humanity is deeply honored by this invitation. To be considered worthy of joining a civilization that spans thousands of star systems and countless generations is a recognition we do not take lightly." Zethran nodded, reaching for the ceremonial stylus that would record Daniel's acceptance. "However," Daniel continued, "we must respectfully decline." The silence that followed was absolute. It seemed to press against Daniel's ears like a physical force. Across the chamber, thousands of aliens froze in place, uncertain they had heard correctly. Zethran's hand stopped mid-reach, hovering over the stylus as if he had forgotten how to move. "Decline?" The word came out like Zethran had never spoken it before, like it was a foreign concept his mind could not process. "Decline," Daniel confirmed. "We have reviewed the terms of membership carefully. We have studied the history of this council and observed the effects of membership on your constituent species. And we have concluded that joining would require us to sacrifice the very qualities that define us as human." Murmurs began to spread through the chamber. Delegates leaned toward each other, whispering in 100 different languages. The polite atmosphere was cracking, replaced by confusion and growing anger. "This is unprecedented," Zethron said, his composure beginning to fracture. No species has refused membership in over 3,000 years. Then perhaps it is time someone did. Daniel turned away from the podium to address the entire assembly. His voice rose to fill the chamber, carrying to every seat and every camera. We came to the stars because we could not accept limits. When our planet grew too small, we reached for the moon. When our solar system could not contain us, we built ships to cross the void between stars. We spread across worlds that tried to kill us, because we refused to be told where we could and could not live. He paused, letting his words settle into the stunned silence. We have read your membership agreement. We have seen the clauses that would put our military under your command. We have seen the provisions that would let you relocate our colonies at will. We have seen the requirements for approval before we can adapt and grow and change. And we have decided that no gift is worth that price. You will be alone, Zethron warned, his voice carrying a clear threat. The galaxy is dangerous for those without allies. Without the protection of the Council, humanity will face challenges you cannot imagine. Daniel smiled, and there was no fear in that smile. We have always been alone. Earth was alone when life first crawled out of the oceans. We were alone when we split the atom and touched the face of the moon. We were alone when we buried our dead and launched our children toward distant stars. Loneliness does not frighten us. It is where we have always done our best work. He signaled to his delegation, and they began moving toward the exit. Thousands of alien eyes followed them, some angry, some confused, but a few watching with something that looked like wonder. The Council will not forget this insult, Zethron called after them, his voice echoing through the chamber. Daniel stopped at the great doors and looked back. His gaze swept across the assembled representatives, species that had surrendered their dreams for the comfort of certainty. And among them, he saw faces beginning to question, minds beginning to wonder. We do not intend this as an insult, Daniel replied. We intend it as a reminder that there is another way to exist in this universe, that safety is not worth the cost of your freedom. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from everything that has been offered to you and build something new. The doors opened behind him, and the light of distant stars poured into the chamber. Humanity came to the stars because we believed there was something worth finding out there. We are not going to stop believing that now. And if there is anyone in this chamber who still remembers what it felt like to dream, we will be waiting for you among the stars. He turned and walked through the doors. His delegation followed, and the Galactic Council watched in stunned disbelief as humanity simply walked away. In the years that followed, the Council tried everything they had tried before. Trade routes were closed, diplomatic pressure was applied, conflicts were encouraged along human borders. But humanity had been warned, they had prepared, and they had spent their entire history learning how to survive against impossible odds. The Council had existed unchanged for 12,000 years. But on the day humanity walked away, something shifted. Other species began to ask questions. The Fenari remembered their ancient ships. The Droon broke their long silence. And across the galaxy, dreams that had been sleeping for millennia began to stir. The Council had wanted humanity to become like everyone else. Instead, humanity reminded everyone else what they had forgotten, that the universe belongs to those brave enough to reach for it. The massive ship moved slowly through the darkness of space. Inside, Ambassador Daniel Carter stood near the wide observation window and watched the stars pass by. He had been waiting for this moment his entire career. After 60 years of watching, testing, and judging, the Galactic Council had finally invited humanity to join them. Amy Preston walked up beside him. She was his chief advisor and the smartest person he knew when it came to alien cultures. Her eyes reflected the distant light of a purple nebula as she spoke. Hard to believe we're actually here, she said quietly. Daniel nodded, but did not smile. 60 years they made us wait. 60 years of proving ourselves, trading with them, fighting pirates alongside them, showing them we could be trusted. And now they finally think we're good enough. That's what worries me. The ship was called the Horizon's Edge, and it carried humanity's hope for a new future among the stars. For centuries, humans had dreamed of joining the greater galactic community. The Council represented 47 different species, all working together in peace. They had technology beyond anything Earth had ever created. They had knowledge gathered over 12,000 years. And now they were offering humanity a seat at the table. The crystalline station appeared before them like a diamond floating in the void. It was enormous, larger than any structure humans had ever built. Towers of glass and metal stretched in every direction, catching the light of nearby stars and sending it scattering across space like scattered jewels. "Docking in 10 minutes, announced Lieutenant Commander Kevin Walsh over the ship's speakers. He was in charge of security for the mission. Daniel turned away from the window. "Get everyone ready. We need to make a good impression." The docking process took longer than expected. Alien protocols were different from human ones, and there were dozens of security checks to pass through. But eventually, the delegation stepped off their ship and onto the station. The air smelled strange, like flowers mixed with something metallic. The gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth standard. And everywhere Daniel looked, he saw aliens of every shape and size moving through the corridors. Some walked on two legs like humans. Others floated through the air on invisible currents. A few seemed to flow along the ground like living water. Each species wore different clothing, spoke different languages, and looked at the human visitors with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. A tall figure approached them. He had silver skin that seemed to shimmer under the lights, 4 arms folded across his chest, and eyes that were completely black. Daniel recognized him from the briefing files. "High Counselor Zethran," Daniel said, offering a slight bow. "Thank you for receiving us." Zethran studied him for a long moment before speaking. His voice was smooth and deep, like stones rolling underwater. "Ambassador Carter, humanity has shown remarkable progress over the past decades. Your species has demonstrated both technological capability and relative stability. We are pleased to extend this invitation. We are honored to receive it. Come, there is much to discuss." They followed Zethran through winding corridors and massive chambers. Other aliens stopped to watch them pass, whispering to each other in languages the human translators could not decipher. Daniel kept his face calm, but inside he was memorizing every detail, noting every reaction. The council chamber itself was breathtaking. It was a circular room, with seats rising up in tiers on all sides, like an ancient amphitheater. At the center was a raised platform where speakers could address the entire assembly. Holographic displays floated everywhere, showing data streams and translations in hundreds of different scripts. "This is where the fate of the galaxy is decided," Zethran said with obvious pride. "For 12,000 years, the Council has maintained peace and order among our member species. Wars have been prevented. Resources have been shared. Conflicts have been resolved through wisdom rather than violence." "Impressive," Amy said, though Daniel noticed she was looking at the exits rather than the decorations. "You will be given quarters here on the station while we finalize the membership agreement," Zethran continued. "Our legal teams will provide you with all necessary documents. Once you have reviewed and accepted the terms, we will hold a formal ceremony to welcome humanity into our fellowship." That evening, Daniel and his team gathered in their assigned quarters. The rooms were comfortable, but felt slightly wrong, designed for bodies shaped differently than human ones. Dr. Lisa Monroe, their expert on alien societies, had already started analyzing the documents they had received. "There's a lot here," she said, scrolling through holographic pages of text. Trade agreements, defense treaties, technology sharing protocols. Most of it looks standard. Most of it? Daniel asked. Lisa hesitated. There are some clauses buried deep in the text. They're written in very careful language, almost hidden among the more boring sections. Show me. What Daniel read made his blood run cold. Clause 47B stated that during any council-declared emergency, all member species would surrender independent military command to council authority. Clause 112C allowed the council to relocate any colonies that occupied space deemed strategically valuable. And Clause 298A required council approval for any genetic modifications to member species, including modifications that humans had already made decades ago to help colonists survive on harsh worlds. They want control, Amy said softly, reading over his shoulder. Complete control. Every major decision would need their approval, Daniel realized. Where we can live, how we can defend ourselves, even what changes we can make to our own bodies. Kevin Walsh, who had been standing guard by the door, stepped closer. That's not membership. That's surrender. Daniel stared at the documents for a long time. Outside the window, the station glittered with lights from 1,000 different species, all of them living under council rule, all of them bound by these same agreements. They've been doing this for 12,000 years, he said finally. Every species that joined, every civilization that signed these documents, they all became part of the system. They all gave up their independence. Maybe they didn't have a choice, Lisa suggested. Everyone has a choice. Daniel closed the holographic display. The question is whether we're brave enough to make one. He looked at his team, at the people who had traveled across the galaxy to represent their entire species. They had come here expecting to join something greater than themselves. Instead, they had found a cage wrapped in golden promises. We need more information, Daniel decided. I want to know what happened to species that didn't join. I want to know what membership really means, not what they tell newcomers. And I want to know it before we sign anything. Amy nodded slowly. You think there's something they're not telling us? I think, Daniel said, that anything this perfect must be hiding something very ugly underneath. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the small drama unfolding on the station. But for humanity, everything was about to change. The invitation had been received. Now came the hard part. Deciding whether to accept it.